Deep in the Sahara rests a stone circle far older than Stonehenge. This is Nabta Playa, a mysterious collection of megaliths that has been called the Stonehenge of the Sahara. By the end of this, you will understand how a site built by nomadic herders might hold the key to humanity's earliest astronomy. Why would ancient people build a complex observatory in the middle of a desert? And could their knowledge have sparked the first glimmers of Egyptian civilization? What forgotten story do you think these silent stones are waiting to tell? A group of archaeologists led by Fred Wendorf drove across the Egyptian desert in the 1970s, a landscape so vast and empty it felt like another world. Their vehicle kicked up clouds of pale dust as they surveyed a region known as the Nubian Desert, a particularly harsh segment of the Sahara. They were not looking for a stone circle. They were simply documenting the ancient past of a place everyone assumed was barren and forgotten. What they found, scattered across the flat expanse of an ancient, dried-up lakebed called Nabta Playa, seemed at first to be little more than a jumble of rocks. To an untrained eye, it would have been easy to dismiss them as a natural formation, stones pushed around by millennia of wind and the occasional rare flood. But Wendorf and his team recognized something deliberate in the arrangement. The stones were not randomly placed, they were set with a strange, silent intention. The very remoteness of this location, a place so difficult to reach that it saw hardly any human traffic for thousands of years, had acted as a perfect preservative. The site had been left undisturbed, holding its secret long after the people who built it had vanished. The first glance was profoundly deceiving, a simple puzzle hiding a complex astronomical code. The scattered stones began to reveal a startling order. What first appeared as a random jumble resolved into distinct, purposeful structures. There were large, flat slabs of sandstone, some standing upright, others lying flat like tables. Nearby, low, circular mounds of stone, known as tumuli, rose from the earth, their shapes hinting at ceremonial or burial functions. But the most puzzling features were the complex arrangements, lines of smaller stones that radiated outwards and circles that seemed to enclose empty space. This was no simple campsite left behind by wandering herders. The sheer labor involved in moving these massive stones spoke of a coordinated community, a society with a shared goal that went far beyond basic survival. The initial theory of a temporary pastoral stopover was crumbling with every new stone the team mapped. Then came the carbon dating, a scientific process that measures the age of organic materials. The results were staggering. Charcoal and bone fragments found at the very deepest layers of the site were dated to around 7,000 to 6,500 years before the Common Era. This single finding shattered all preconceptions. It meant that while the cultures of Europe were still in their early stages, a group of people in the heart of the Sahara were erecting complex stone structures. This place was not just older than Stonehenge, it was millennia older, a prehistoric observatory built when the desert was a green, fertile savanna. How could a society this ancient possess the knowledge and organization to build such a place, and what urgent need drove them to do it? The mystery of the stones only deepened when scientists looked beyond the sand and towards the stars. A groundbreaking theory emerged primarily from the work of astrophysicist Thomas G. Brophy, who saw in the scattered stones a deliberate and complex pattern. He argued that these were not just ritual placements, the stones were aligned with a precise celestial purpose. Specific lines of smaller stones, known as megalithic lines, were found to point towards distinct spots on the distant horizon. This was not a random arrangement, it was a deliberate code written in rock. This field of study, called archaeoastronomy, explores how ancient cultures understood and recorded the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. It suggests that long before written records, people were careful observers of the sky, using its cycles to mark time, to plan their agriculture, and to shape their beliefs. If Brophy was correct, then Nabta Playa was not merely a ceremonial site. It could be one of the world's oldest known astronomical observatories, a Stone Age calendar built under a vast Saharan sky. What could these ancient herders have been trying to track with such careful, painstaking effort, and why was it so vital to their survival in a changing world? Among the various stone arrangements, one small circle stands out for its elegant simplicity and profound purpose. This is the so-called calendar circle, a ring of stones no larger than a few meters across. At first glance, it appears unremarkable, just a handful of upright slabs set in a rough circle on the hard, dry ground. But look closer and you see the genius of its design. The stones are not spaced evenly. Instead, there are distinct, narrow gaps between specific pairs of them. Researchers have proposed that these slots were not random mistakes, but deliberate sightlines like the crosshairs in a telescope. The most crucial of these slots is believed to have been aligned with the point on the horizon where the sun would rise on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Imagine the scene. On that one pivotal morning, a designated watcher would have seen the first sliver of the sun appear precisely within that narrow stone gap, a brilliant flare of light signaling a cosmic event. This was not just about marking a day, it was about predicting the future. The summer solstice sunrise acted as a celestial alarm clock. Its arrival heralded the imminent start of the seasonal monsoon rains, the lifeblood of their world. For a society of herders living in a savanna that was slowly drying out, knowing exactly when the rains would come was not a matter of convenience, it was a matter of survival. This knowledge dictated when to move their herds to the playa, when the shallow lakebed would fill with water and lush grasses would sprout. The calendar circle transformed the vast, unpredictable sky into a reliable, stone-based almanac. It gave them the power to anticipate the seasons, to plan their migrations with a confidence that must have seemed like magic. How many other ancient calendars, lost to time, began with such a simple, brilliant observation of the world? But the calendar circle was just the beginning of a much grander cosmic design. Beyond that small ring, the desert floor is etched with long, straight lines of smaller stones, some stretching for hundreds of meters. These are not random paths, they are precise sight lines aiming at the very heart of the night sky. One of the most compelling theories suggests that these megalithic lines were aligned to point directly toward the rising points of specific brilliant stars. Imagine standing at one end of such a line on a clear, dark Saharan night, long before the light pollution of modern cities. Your gaze would be drawn along that stone pathway to a spot on the horizon where, at a precise time of year, the three distinct stars of Orion's belt would first appear, rising together. Another line may have targeted Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, a blazing beacon whose appearance was a critical event for many ancient cultures. Why would these stars hold such importance for desert herders? For a people whose lives were dictated by seasonal change, the stars were a perfect, unchanging clock. The annual rising of Sirius, known as its heliacal rising, when it becomes visible just before dawn after a period of invisibility, often coincided with the coming of the Nile flood in Egypt. While Nabta Playa predates dynastic Egypt, the people there would have seen the same celestial events. Orion and Sirius were not just pretty lights, they were harbingers. Their arrival in the pre-dawn sky signaled a shift in the seasons, a time to prepare for the life-giving rains or to begin a long-planned migration. These long stone lines transformed the entire landscape into a giant astronomical instrument, permanently recording these crucial celestial events in a language of stone and starlight. What does it say about a culture that they invested such immense effort to map the heavens onto the earth, creating a permanent record of the sky that would outlast them by thousands of years? This celestial mapping at Nabta Playa reaches its most profound and controversial expression with a theory that connects the stones directly to the constellation of Orion. You might have heard of the Orion correlation theory applied to the Great Pyramids of Giza, suggesting their layout mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt. But what if that idea originated thousands of years earlier here in the Sahara? At Nabta Playa, researchers noticed something extraordinary. The main megalithic structures, including the central stone circle and the larger tumuli, are not arranged randomly. Their positions on the ground seem to form a pattern that closely matches the stars of Orion's belt, but with a crucial difference. This is not the Orion we see in our night sky today. The arrangement at Nabta Playa corresponds to the precise position of those stars as they would have appeared in the sky around 6,500 years ago. This is the heart of a staggering possibility. The slow, gradual wobble of Earth's rotational axis, a cycle known as precession, causes the positions of the stars to shift minutely over vast periods of time. A full cycle takes about 26,000 years. For the stars to be perfectly aligned with the stones, the builders would have had to account for this drift. They would have needed to understand that the sky itself changes over centuries, a concept so advanced it seems impossible for a Stone Age culture. Could these nomadic herders have possessed an astronomical knowledge so deep that they were recording celestial time on a scale of millennia, embedding an ancient sky map into the very Earth for future generations? The implications are as vast as the desert itself, suggesting a forgotten chapter in human intellectual history. So who were these master astronomers of the Sahara? They were not kings in palaces, but nomadic cattle herders. The world they inhabited was utterly different from the desert we see today. Around 7,000 years ago, the Sahara was a green and vibrant savanna, a sprawling grassland dotted with acacia trees and seasonal lakes known as playas. This was a land of plenty, teeming with wildlife like gazelle and giraffe, a perfect environment for herding communities. We know they were herders because the archaeological record is clear. At Nabta Playa, researchers have found the bones of domesticated cattle, the very foundation of their society. These were not just a few animals, but large herds that provided milk, meat, and hides. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of the seasons, moving their cattle across the grasslands to follow the rains and the growth of fresh pasture. This image of a simple, nomadic lifestyle creates a fascinating paradox. How could a society without permanent cities, without a written language, and presumably without a rigid social hierarchy, conceive of and construct such a sophisticated astronomical complex? The sheer effort is staggering, moving multi-ton stones across the landscape and positioning them with celestial precision. This was not a task done in a day. It would have required generations of coordinated labor, a shared vision passed down from elders to children over centuries. This forces us to rethink the very origins of complex society. We often assume that monumentality, that grand, coordinated building projects, only emerge after the invention of agriculture, with settled villages and a surplus of food that allows for specialized classes like priests and engineers. Nabta Playa turns that idea on its head. Here, a society of nomadic pastoralists achieved a profound intellectual and architectural feat. Their complexity was not written in stone walls or granaries, but in their deep understanding of the cosmos and their ability to encode that knowledge into the Earth itself. Their calendar and star maps were not a product of an established civilization. They may have been the very catalyst that sparked one. The stones were not the only sacred markers on this ancient landscape. Beneath the surface, archaeologists uncovered something just as telling: the carefully arranged graves of cattle. These were not simple butchering sites. They were formal burials where entire cows were placed in specially dug chambers, their bodies oriented with clear intention. One of the most striking finds was a young cow interred within a roofed, clay-lined structure, a level of care that speaks volumes. This was more than just disposing of an animal. It was a ritual act. For these herders, cattle were the center of their universe. They provided milk, blood, and meat, the staples of survival. Their hides became shelter and clothing, their dung fuel for fires. but the burials at Nabta Playa suggest their importance ran far deeper than mere economics. These animals were likely symbols of wealth and status, the foundation of social power. More than that, they may have held a profound spiritual significance. The deliberate, ceremonial treatment of these burials points to the existence of what scholars call a cattle cult, a belief system where the bovine was venerated, perhaps seen as a gift from the gods or even a divine intermediary itself. This idea is not unique to the Sahara. Across Africa, from the pastoralists of the Sudan to the ancient rock art of the Tassili Ennager in Algeria, we find echoes of this deep reverence for cattle. It seems the people of Nabta Playa were part of a vast, interconnected cultural tradition that stretched across a green and populated Sahara. Their entire worldview, from the stars they tracked to the animals they herded, was woven into a single, cohesive tapestry of belief. How does this change our view of their astronomical complex? It suggests the stone circles and star alignments were not just a practical tool for survival. They were likely part of a larger, integrated ritual landscape, a sacred place where the cycles of the sky, the blessings of rain, and the power of their most vital animal were all honored together. The cattle and the cosmos were inextricably linked. To truly grasp the sophistication of Nabta Playa, we must walk among its stones and see them not as isolated monuments, but as components of a grand, integrated design. At the heart of the site lies what archaeologists call the complex structure, a formation that defies simple explanation. Picture a series of large, flat sandstone slabs, some standing upright, others lying horizontally, arranged in a pattern that seems almost architectural. These are not random pillars, they appear to be laid out with a deliberate geometry. Some researchers have proposed that this entire arrangement is not a building in the conventional sense, but rather a symbolic representation, a kind of map. Could these slabs be modeling a celestial pattern, or perhaps charting the territories of their seasonal migrations? The structure feels like a diagram etched into the earth, a permanent record of knowledge that was too important to be left to memory alone. Surrounding this central complex are the enigmatic tumuli, the stone-covered mounds that dot the landscape. These are not mere piles of rock. Excavations revealed that beneath these cairns were carefully constructed tombs. Inside, archaeologists found not human remains, but the skeletons of cattle ritually interred. One particularly elaborate tomb housed a young steer in a clay-lined chamber, a clear sign of veneration. These tumuli were sacred spaces, connecting the world of the living with the spiritual realm through their most valued animal. Then comes the question that haunts every visitor to this remote site: how was any of this built? The largest stones weigh several tons, and the nearest source for this specific sandstone is kilometers away. These people had no wheels, no draft animals suited for such labor, and no metal tools to shape the rock. The only technology available to them was brute human strength, simple levers, ropes made from plant fibers, and an immense collective will. They likely transported the slabs during the wet season, when the hardened clay of the playa softened into mud, allowing them to slide the stones on log rollers or perhaps even on slick, wet clay tracks. Erecting the standing stones would have required coordinated effort, using ramps of earth and ropes to slowly, painstakingly pull them into an upright position. This was not a frantic construction project, but a generational endeavor, a continuous act of faith and knowledge passed down through countless seasons. Each stone placed was a testament to their deep connection with this land and their unwavering determination to mark their understanding of the cosmos upon it. But how do we know with such certainty just how ancient this place truly is? The answer lies not only in the stones themselves, but in the tiny, fragile fragments of the past trapped beneath them. Scientists have used a technique called radiocarbon dating to unlock the site's age. This method works by measuring the slow, predictable decay of a radioactive form of carbon found in all living things. When an organism, like a plant or an animal, dies, this radioactive clock starts ticking. By analyzing the remaining amount in a sample, researchers can calculate how long it has been since that organism was alive. At Nabta Playa, the perfect subjects for this were the very bones of the buried cattle and the remnants of ancient charcoal from campfires. The results painted a startlingly clear timeline. The oldest activity at the site, the first time people began to mark this place as special, dates back to around 7,000 years before the Common Era. That is over 9,000 years ago, but this was not a single event, it was a continuous tradition. The site was used, modified, and expanded for millennia, with the final major constructions occurring around 3,500 years before the Common Era. To grasp the sheer scale of this timeline, consider the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built around 2,500 years before the Common Era. The oldest stones at Nabta Playa were already more than 4,000 years old when the first Egyptian pyramid was even a thought. This firmly places the entire lifespan of this Saharan observatory in the pre-dynastic era, a time long before pharaohs, hieroglyphs, or a unified Egypt existed. A sophisticated, astronomical culture was already gazing at the stars, building a legacy in stone, while the civilization we often call the cradle of the West was still in its distant, unformed future. The world these herders inhabited was a world of water and life. To stand at Nabta Playa today, you see only sand and stone under a relentless sun. But if you could peel back the millennia, you would witness a breathtaking transformation. The vast, arid basin was once a sprawling, seasonal lake, a playa, surrounded by a sea of waving grasses and acacia trees. Herds of giraffe, gazelle, and antelope grazed this savanna, sharing the land with the domesticated cattle that were the center of human society. This was not a permanent paradise, but a landscape shaped by a powerful planetary rhythm known as the African Humid Period. For thousands of years, a slight wobble in Earth's orbit brought the monsoon rains farther north, turning the Sahara into a green and habitable corridor. This was the context for everything that happened at Nabta Playa. The people did not build their celestial calendar in a desert, they built it in a land of plenty, but a land whose abundance was precariously tied to the sky. Their sophisticated astronomy was a direct response to this environment, a tool to predict the coming and going of the rains that filled their lake and nourished their grasslands. Their entire civilization was made possible by this ancient climate cycle. But what happens when the climate shifts once more? Around 5,500 years ago, the African Humid Period began to wane. The orbital cycle shifted, the monsoons retreated south, and the green Sahara began to die. The process was slow, taking centuries, but the trend was inexorable. The grasslands turned to dust, the Playa Lake dried up for the last time, and the familiar wildlife vanished. For the people of Nabta Playa, this was an existential threat. Their way of life, built around seasonal cattle herding on the savanna, was becoming impossible. The very reason for their complex calendar was disappearing with the rains. They faced a stark choice: stay and perish, or leave in search of a new home. Where could they go? The most logical and compelling direction was east, toward the one permanent source of water in the region, the Nile River. This migration theory is one of the most captivating ideas in archaeology. Did the dispersed, climate refugee pastoralists from the drying Sahara bring their knowledge with them? Did they carry the seeds of their advanced astronomy, their ritual cattle veneration, and their skills in communal stone working to the nascent cultures along the Nile? The timeline is provocative. The final use of Nabta Playa fades around 3,500 years before the Common Era, just as the pre-dynastic cultures of the Nile Valley were beginning to coalesce into something new. It is a haunting possibility that the end of one world in the desert may have been the catalyst for the beginning of another on the river, a journey of knowledge written not on papyrus but in the silent, patient stones they left behind. This theory raises a profound question that echoes across the desert. Could the people who vanished from Nabta Playa have become the founders of ancient Egypt? The timeline is startlingly persuasive. As the Sahara dried and the playa became uninhabitable around 5,500 years ago, the logical path for survival was a migration eastward toward the perennial waters of the Nile River. This period of climatic crisis coincides almost perfectly with the emergence of the distinct, complex cultures in the Nile Valley that would later unite to form the world of the pharaohs. It is not a giant leap to suggest that the refugees from the Green Sahara brought their most vital knowledge with them, seeding the very ideas that would blossom into one of history's most iconic civilizations. Look at the cultural echoes. At Nabta Playa, we saw a society that ritually buried its cattle, treating them with a reverence that suggests a deep spiritual connection. Now look at the pantheon of early Egypt. The goddess Hathor, one of the most ancient and beloved deities, was consistently depicted as a cow, a divine mother figure associated with the sky, fertility, and nourishment. She was not merely an animal, she was a celestial force. This is not a vague parallel, it feels like a direct cultural inheritance. The cattle cult of the Sahara, born from the practical and spiritual needs of nomadic herders, could have evolved into the sophisticated bovine veneration central to Egyptian religion. The sacred animal, once the center of a desert pastoral world, became a celestial goddess in a riverine kingdom. The astronomical connection is even more compelling. The people of Nabta Playa were master sky watchers who built a stone calendar to track the solstice and aligned megaliths to the rising of stars like Sirius. This was not lost knowledge. In dynastic Egypt, the heliacal rising of Sirius, known as Sopdet, was the most critical celestial event of the year. Its appearance in the dawn sky heralded the imminent, life-giving flooding of the Nile, the event upon which all of Egyptian agriculture and society depended. The Egyptian calendar was intricately tied to this star. The precision of their sky law did not appear out of nowhere. It had a precursor, a practice run in the sands of the Sahara. The knowledge of how to read the sky for seasonal prediction, so vital to survival in a marginal environment like the savannah, would have been an invaluable intellectual toolkit when transplanted to the banks of the Nile. So what if the story is true? What if the origins of Egypt's greatness were not born solely on the Nile but were carried there by desert nomads? This is not to diminish the incredible achievements of the Egyptians themselves, but to suggest a deeper, more complex origin story. The first glimmers of their civilization, the organization needed to build monuments, the theological concepts of animal deities, the advanced understanding of the stars may have been forged in the challenging, changing landscape of the Sahara. Nabta Playa stands as a silent, ancient monument to a forgotten diaspora, a people who, when their world dried up, carried the seeds of a future empire within them. Their greatest monument may not be the stones they left behind, but the civilization their descendants would one day build. Yet for all the celestial grandeur of its design, another theory suggests the stones of Nabta Playa were rooted in something far more earthly and immediate. A compelling, if less mainstream, idea proposes that the site was as much about water as it was about the stars. In this view, the complex arrangements of stones and the excavated underground chambers were not just ceremonial, they were part of an advanced system for water management. Imagine the critical need. Even in a green Sahara, water was the ultimate currency, and its presence was not always visible on the surface. The seasonal rains would fill the Playa Lake, but the life-sustaining groundwater beneath the earth was the true reservoir for survival during the dry months. Some researchers hypothesize that the specific placement of the megaliths, particularly the larger slabs, could have served as markers for subterranean water sources, mapping the invisible aquifers that lay deep below the desert floor. The knowledge of where to dig a well, of where the water table was closest to the surface, would have been a form of power as vital as any astronomical prediction. This theory paints a picture of a society that was not only looking up at the heavens, but was also deeply attuned to the secrets of the earth beneath their feet. Their genius may have been a holistic one, merging celestial cycles with terrestrial hydrology. The stones could have functioned as a dual-purpose map, one that charted the stars above to predict the coming rains, and simultaneously marked the hidden water below to ensure its use long after the skies had cleared. In an environment where the margin between life and death could be as thin as a single season without rain, this combination of astronomical and hydrological wisdom would have been the ultimate key to survival. It suggests a practical, ingenious layer to the mystery, where every standing stone was a promise of both celestial order and earthly sustenance. Of course, such a revolutionary interpretation of Nabta Playa was bound to attract its share of skeptics. The very boldness of the astronomical claims invites a healthy dose of scientific scrutiny. Some archaeologists and astronomers argue that we might be seeing patterns in the stones that the original builders never intended. They point out that with a large number of rocks scattered across a wide area, it is statistically likely that some will, purely by chance, align with significant celestial points on the horizon. Could the entire complex be an elaborate coincidence, a Rorschach test in stone where modern researchers project their own knowledge onto an ancient, and perhaps much simpler, reality? The central challenge is the sheer age of the site. Over thousands of years, the relentless forces of wind, sand, and occasional flash floods have undoubtedly shifted some of the smaller stones. A slab that was precisely positioned 6,000 years ago may have settled at a slightly different angle, making a once perfect alignment now appear just a little bit off. This erosion of evidence makes definitive proof incredibly difficult. How can we be certain a stone line pointed to the rising of Sirius when that stone might have moved a few centimeters centuries ago? The debate often centers on the margin of error. Proponents of the astronomical theory acknowledge that the alignments are not as precise as a modern laser pointer, but they argue the general direction is too consistent to be random. Critics counter that general direction is not enough to prove intentionality for a culture we know so little about. Without any written records from the people themselves, we are left to interpret their silent monuments, and that interpretation is always filtered through our own modern lens. This is not a weakness of the research, but rather the very essence of archaeology. It is a living, breathing science built on debate, where each new theory is rigorously tested by the community. The controversy surrounding Nabta Playa does not diminish its wonder, it enhances it. It reminds us that the past is not a simple puzzle with one correct answer, but a complex tapestry of possibilities, and that the search for understanding is just as important as the conclusions we might draw. The scale of Stonehenge is undeniably grand, a massive ring of towering sarsen stones that dominates the English countryside. In comparison, the stones of Nabta Playa seem almost humble, a collection of smaller slabs lying flat on a dusty plain. Yet this visual contrast hides a far more revealing truth. When we place these two sites side by side, their differences tell a story of separate, brilliant chapters in humanity's long quest to understand the cosmos. Stonehenge, as we know it today, was constructed over centuries with its iconic stone circle erected around 4,500 years ago. The main complex at Nabta Playa, however, was already ancient by that time, its first stones set in place more than 1,000 years earlier. One site is a product of the Neolithic age in Europe, the other a legacy of a much older African pastoral society. Their purposes, while both celestial, may have sprung from entirely different needs. Stonehenge, with its precise alignments to the summer and winter solstices, likely served as a vast ceremonial center for a settled agricultural people, a place to gather and mark the turning of the seasons essential for their crops. Nabta Playa, built by nomadic cattle herders, functioned as a precise, practical calendar tied to the imminent arrival of seasonal rains. Its smaller, more distributed stones acted as a survival tool, predicting the migration of herds and the filling of the lake bed. One was a monumental temple for a community rooted to the land. The other was a vital instrument for a society on the move. This is not a competition, but a crucial expansion of our historical perspective. For generations, the narrative of early human achievement has been heavily centered on sites in Europe and the Near East. The existence of Nabta Playa, so much older and so sophisticated, demands we widen that lens. It represents a powerful, independent, and deeply African innovation in megalithic astronomy. It proves that the intellectual spark to encode celestial knowledge in stone did not ignite in one place and then spread, but flickered to life in multiple hearts across the globe, born from the universal human need to find order in the heavens and apply it to life on Earth. The silent stones of the Sahara are not a lesser version of a European ideal. They are a profound precursor, a testament to a forgotten lineage of sky watchers whose legacy may have flowed directly into the Nile. The silent stones tell only part of the story. To truly understand the people of Nabta Playa, we must look to their final resting places where the bones of the dead whisper secrets of the society they left behind. Several burials discovered near the stone complex reveal a surprising pattern. One of the most significant was the grave of an elderly woman. She was not buried with simple, everyday tools. Accompanying her into the afterlife were carefully crafted artifacts, including beads and ornaments that would have required considerable skill and time to produce. This was not a typical burial for a simple herder. It suggests a person of importance, someone whose role in the community was honored and remembered. Even more telling was the positioning of her body and the structure of her grave, which mirrored the care given to the ritually interred cattle. This parallel treatment is profound. If cattle were the spiritual and economic center of their world, then a human buried with similar reverence must have held a central place in their social and cosmic order. Was this woman a leader, a keeper of knowledge, or perhaps both? The grave goods suggest she was someone of status, but the nature of that status points away from a warrior chieftain and toward something more intellectual and spiritual. In a society so deeply invested in tracking the stars, the keepers of that celestial calendar would have been among its most vital members. It is a compelling thought that the person who knew when the sun would align with the stone slots, who could read the approach of Sirius on the horizon, might have been a woman like this, a respected elder guiding her people through the rhythms of the sky and the seasons. This single burial opens a window into a social structure that may have been far more fluid and egalitarian than the rigid, male-dominated hierarchies that would later characterize many ancient civilizations. The evidence does not point to a society where leadership was exclusively male or female, but rather one where status was earned through knowledge, wisdom, and the ability to navigate a challenging world. Could the intricate knowledge of the calendar and the stars have been a domain where women held significant, even primary, authority? The organization needed to build the stone complexes suggests a culture that valued different forms of power, where the priestess who predicted the rains could be as crucial as the strongest hunter. This stands in stark contrast to the dynastic Egypt that followed, where pharaohs were almost exclusively male and power was deeply patriarchal. The people of Nabta Playa, it seems, may have organized their world differently, valuing the essential contributions of all members long before such roles became codified and restricted. Their legacy is not just written in the stars, but in the earth, where the honored dead suggest a forgotten model of community. So how did they achieve such precise alignments without any of the tools we take for granted? This was a society with no written language, no metal, and no wheels. Their technology was built from stone, wood, and an intimate familiarity with their environment. The secret likely lay in a combination of simple, elegant tools and a deep generational memory. To align a stone with a star rising on the distant horizon, they may have used a basic yet brilliant device, the sighting pole. Picture a lone, straight wooden stake driven firmly into the ground. A watcher would position their eye behind this pole, carefully shifting their position until the first glint of a star appeared to brush directly against its top. They would then drive a second pole into the Earth to mark that precise line of sight. Over many nights, they could refine this alignment, creating a permanent record on the landscape before ever moving a single heavy stone. This method requires no advanced mathematics, only patience, a sharp eye, and a profound understanding of the sky's gradual changes. The real technology was not in the pole itself, but in the accumulated knowledge that guided its placement, knowledge passed down from elder to apprentice over countless seasons. This was a living library of the stars where the movement of celestial bodies was memorized, recited, and physically enacted in ritual and practice. We must wonder what else they knew that left no trace behind. Their understanding of plants for medicine, their intricate social codes for resolving conflict, their entire oral history and mythology, all of this is lost to us. The stones are the one part of their world durable enough to survive, a cryptic and permanent skeleton of a much richer, vibrant culture. Their true genius may have been their ability to build a complex intellectual tradition without ever writing a single word, embedding their most vital knowledge directly into the landscape and the minds of their children. What other profound insights into the natural world vanished when their way of life finally faded from the desert? The stones of Nabta Playa have not yet given up all their secrets. While the initial discoveries rewrote history, the work of understanding this ancient observatory is far from over. Modern archaeologists are now returning to the site armed not just with shovels and brushes, but with an array of sophisticated technologies that let them see beneath the sand without ever breaking the ground. One of the most powerful of these tools is ground-penetrating radar. Think of it as a kind of X-ray vision for the Earth. Researchers slowly drag a radar unit across the dry surface, sending pulses of energy deep into the ground. These signals bounce back, creating a detailed image of what lies hidden below, revealing buried stones, old hearths, and the outlines of structures that have been invisible for millennia. This non-invasive method is crucial as it preserves the fragile site while still unlocking its hidden layers. From even higher up, satellites orbiting the planet capture high-resolution imagery that can detect subtle variations in the soil and vegetation, hinting at ancient pathways or settlements long since vanished. These technologies are painting a much more complex picture of Nabta Playa than we ever had before. It is becoming clear that the central stone circle and the famous calendar are just one part of a much larger ceremonial and functional landscape, a sprawling network of features that covered this entire basin. So what new questions are driving this research today? Contemporary archaeologists are no longer just asking what the stones align with, but why this specific location was chosen for such an immense project. They are investigating the social structure of the people, trying to understand how a nomadic society organized itself to undertake a generational project of this scale. They are analyzing microscopic pollen grains preserved in the ancient lakebed mud to reconstruct the exact environment these herders lived in, determining what plants grew here and how the climate changed year by year. Every new scan and every new soil core sample adds another piece to the puzzle. The mystery of Nabta Playa is not a closed book sitting on a shelf. It is an active excavation site, both physically and intellectually, where each season of digging and scanning promises to challenge what we thought we knew. The story of humanity's first astronomers is still being written, one buried stone at a time. Nabta Playa does not stand alone in the vast silence of the Sahara. This entire desert, now so empty, was once a vibrant crossroads of human culture, its history written in stone and pigment. To the west, in the high plateau of Algeria, lies the Tassili en-Najer, a breathtaking open-air art gallery spanning thousands of years. Here, the cave walls are alive with images of a lost world. You see towering figures with rounded heads, what some call the great gods of Tassili, alongside incredibly detailed scenes of daily life from a green Sahara. Herds of cattle with graceful, lyre-shaped horns are tended by pastoralists, a direct and powerful echo of the people at Nabta Playa. These paintings show hunters pursuing savanna animals like elephants and giraffes, creatures that could not survive in the desert of today. The art chronicles a profound transformation, a visual record of the climate change that forced societies to adapt or move. Far from being an isolated marvel, Nabta Playa fits perfectly into this wider cultural world, a world where cattle were revered and the changing environment was documented with profound artistic skill. Further evidence of a complex Saharan past emerges from later periods with the Garamontes, a civilization that flourished in modern-day Libya long after Nabta Playa was abandoned. While they were an Iron Age society, their achievements are no less astonishing. They were not simple nomads but city builders who constructed a network of underground tunnels known as fagaras to tap into fossil water deep beneath the desert. This allowed them to create a powerful, urban civilization in the heart of the Sahara, complete with written language and a kingdom that challenged the Roman Empire. The Garamontes proved that the desert was never an impenetrable barrier, but a space where human ingenuity could, for a time, triumph over extreme conditions. When we place Nabta Playa alongside these other sites, its story shifts. It is no longer a solitary, inexplicable mystery. Instead, it becomes a foundational piece in a much larger puzzle, a brilliant early chapter in the long and diverse history of ancient North Africa. This region was not a blank slate waiting for civilizations to arrive from elsewhere. It was a cradle of innovation itself, home to cultures that developed sophisticated answers to the challenges of their world. The stones of Nabta Playa are a testament to the depth of this African heritage, a heritage that has only just begun to be understood. The mystery of Nabta Playa has long since escaped the dusty confines of academic journals, igniting the public imagination with a force as potent as the Saharan sun. You can find its echoes in popular documentaries that explore humanity's oldest questions, where the stones are presented as a key piece of the puzzle of our past. The site features prominently in books that delve into ancient mysteries, and its enigmatic profile has even made a surprising appearance in video games, where players can explore a digital reconstruction of this prehistoric observatory. This widespread appeal taps into a powerful cultural vein. Nabta Playa is a perfect storm of fascination, blending three potent ingredients. First is the enduring allure of lost civilizations, a theme that speaks to our fear of oblivion and our wonder at human achievement. Here is a sophisticated society that vanished, leaving behind only cryptic stone markers. Second is the controversial, yet perennially popular, idea of ancient astronauts or advanced lost knowledge. The site's astronomical precision, seemingly out of place for its time, naturally invites speculation about influences beyond our current understanding of history. But perhaps the deepest resonance comes from the third element, a fundamental human desire to find our place in the cosmos. The people of Nabta Playa were not just surviving, they were looking up. They were trying to map the heavens, to find order in the cycles of the stars, and to connect their lives on Earth to the grand machinery of the universe. This is a quest that still defines us today. We look at their stones and we see our own drive to understand the universe reflected back at us across 6,000 years. Their silent monument is a mirror, showing us that the need to ask where we came from and why we are here is one of the most ancient and enduring parts of the human spirit. But the very forces that preserved Nabta Playa for millennia are now turning against it. The desert's harsh environment, once a perfect shield, has become a slow and relentless threat. The primary danger is simple erosion. Wind-blown sand acts like a natural sandblaster, scouring the surfaces of the stones, gradually wearing away any faint carvings or markings that might have existed. More sudden and violent are the rare but powerful flash floods. When rain does fall on the surrounding plateau, it can funnel into the basin with devastating force, dislodging and burying the carefully placed alignments under layers of sediment and debris. Each passing year, the stones settle a little deeper, their precise orientations shifting minutely but significantly. Compounding this natural decay is the looming specter of climate change. As the region grows even hotter and drier, the fragile desert crust that holds the site in place becomes more brittle and vulnerable. Then there is the human element. The site's remoteness is no longer the guarantee of safety it once was. As its fame grows, so does the risk of unregulated tourism. A single careless footstep can knock over a stone that has stood for 6,000 years. Worse still is the potential for looting, the theft of any small, movable artifacts that could hold untold secrets, forever ripping pages from a story we are only just beginning to read. So what is being done to protect this irreplaceable window into our shared past? The site was officially designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2023, a crucial step that brings international recognition and a framework for conservation. This status helps channel resources and expertise toward preserving the stones. On the ground, preservation efforts are delicate. There are no plans to rebuild or restore, as that would destroy the archaeological integrity of the site. Instead, the focus is on meticulous documentation using three-dimensional laser scanning and photogrammetry, creating perfect digital twins of the entire complex. This virtual record ensures that even if a stone is moved by flood or human hands, its original position is known forever. Fencing and controlled access are being considered to manage visitor impact, a difficult balance between sharing this wonder with the world and ensuring it survives for future generations. The race is on not to uncover new secrets, but to save the ones we have already found from fading back into the sand from which they came. Perhaps the true purpose of Nabta Playa was not one single thing, but a powerful fusion of all these elements. We have been trying to separate its functions into neat, modern boxes, astronomy here, religion there, and survival over there. But for the people who built it, these ideas were inseparable parts of a single, unified reality. Think of it as the ultimate gathering place for a society in flux. These nomadic pastoralists were not scattered families. They were a community bound by shared knowledge and shared challenges. At specific times of the year, likely marked by the very celestial events their stones tracked, different clans would have converged on this basin. They came to a place that was already sacred, drawn by the seasonal lake and the promise of pasture. This convergence was about more than just water and grass. It was a social, spiritual, and intellectual rendezvous. The stone circle was their communal clock, its alignments confirming the critical timing for their migrations and the expected rains. The cattle burials were acts of profound thanksgiving and veneration, reinforcing the spiritual bond with the animals that gave them life, and the larger megalithic lines, mapping stars like Orion, connected their earthly movements to a cosmic order, giving their nomadic existence a profound, eternal meaning. This synthesis transforms Nabta Playa from a simple observatory into a central nervous system for an entire culture. It was a place where elders could pass down star lore to the next generation, where disputes were settled, marriages arranged, and rituals performed that strengthened their collective identity. In a world that was slowly drying out, this shared knowledge became their most vital resource. The precision of their astronomy gave them a predictive power that reduced the uncertainty of a changing climate. Their collective rituals fostered a social cohesion that allowed them to undertake massive projects like moving multi-ton stones. This was not a society on the brink of collapse, but one brilliantly adapting to stress, using communal effort and intellectual genius to create a stable anchor in a shifting world. Their legacy is this holistic vision, where tracking a star and honoring a cow were two sides of the same coin, both essential for navigating the beautiful, precarious world they called home. Nabta Playa forces a profound and humbling reassessment of the human story. We have long been taught that civilization, with its grand monuments and complex sciences, was born in the river valleys of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Yet here, in the heart of the Sahara, we find the undeniable blueprint for that very complexity, carved in stone millennia earlier by people we once dismissed as simple nomadic herders. This single site shatters the traditional narrative, demanding we ask a much bigger question. Where does true civilization truly begin? Does it start only with the first written word or the first walled city? Or does it ignite with the first spark of shared, abstract knowledge, with the first collective effort to understand humanity's place in the cosmos? The ingenuity on display here is staggering. These people developed a precise, predictive science of astronomy without any of the tools we consider essential. They engineered a massive stone calendar without wheels or metal. They organized a society capable of this multi-generational project without the coercive power of a king or a standing army. Their science was not separate from their spirituality, it was woven into it. The stones that tracked the solstice were likely part of the same sacred landscape where they reverently buried their cattle, creatures they saw as gifts from the heavens. This fusion of the practical and the profound suggests a different path to complexity, one born from cooperation and a deep communal need to find order in a changing world. So what does this mean for the map of human history? It compels us to redraw it. The so-called cradle of civilization can no longer be confined to the Fertile Crescent alone. It must be expanded to include the green savannas of prehistoric North Africa, a region that nurtured its own brilliant and independent flowering of human intellect. The people of Nabta Playa were not passive recipients of ideas from elsewhere, they were pioneering originators. Their legacy challenges us to look beyond the grand pyramids and ziggurates to the older, quieter places where humanity first learned to read the sky. When you stand before these silent stones, you are not just looking at an ancient ruin. You are witnessing the moment our ancestors stopped merely surviving their environment and began to comprehend its deepest rhythms, an intellectual revolution that would eventually echo down the Nile and into the foundations of the world's first great empires. Their story is a powerful reminder that genius is not the property of any one culture or continent, but a universal human potential waiting to be awakened by the challenge of the world around us. The silent stones of Nabta Playa leave us with three profound and interconnected mysteries. First is the sheer weight of its age, a complex observatory built over 9,000 years ago, long before the pyramids or Stonehenge even existed. Second is the sophistication of its design, a celestial calendar and star map created by nomadic herders with only stone and wood. And third is its haunting legacy, the possibility that its people, fleeing a drying world, carried the seeds of astronomy and bovine veneration east to the Nile, helping to sow the first ideas of ancient Egypt. These stones are more than an archaeological site, they are a testament to a universal human impulse. From the vast star-dusted sky above to the carefully placed rocks on the desert floor, we have always sought to find patterns, to build meaning, and to leave a mark that says we were here and we understood something of the cosmos. Thank you for joining this journey into one of history's deepest enigmas. What do you think the true purpose of Nabta Playa was? Share your own theories in the comments below and subscribe for more explorations into the world's greatest mysteries.